am.
Now YouTube censored.
I'm mad as hell right now. Yes, I am.
Viewer discretion is advised. Mama Black.
This program contains language and sequences some viewers may find disturbing.
We're back with demonstrators in St. Augustine pounding the pavement, marching to make their voices heard. Their goal, removing monuments that stand for an ugly past.
The protest coinciding with an annual holiday celebration. Reporter Kevin Clark has more.
This is what democracy looks like.
Protesters departed St. Paul AME Church with a definite goal in mind.
This is what democracy looks like.
Get to St. Augustine's main plaza for the Night of Lights kickoff and be heard.
We are in a bigger fight.
Led by Pastor Ron Rawls, the group wanted to impact tourism in perhaps the city's biggest event of the year. And when the lights came on, the group was front and center by the stage.
They see what's happening, all that tourists, and they didn't want that to really happen, but we did it anyway because they kept saying it's not the right time. You know how they always say it's not the right time? Well, it was the right time.
And at the center of the group's frustration, 2 Confederate monuments and St. Augustine's recent decision not to remove them. The city wants to add context to the monuments. The hundreds of protesters marching around the plaza frustrated some visitors and tourists who didn't expect this at the Night of Lights event. Some told us, views on the monuments aside, they thought the protest was distracting and inappropriate.
I got irritated at first, and then I went and talked to the people over there. And I did want to go talk to the protesters, but I was held back by my husband, who has more of a sense of calmness about it.
But after the protest, Mayor Nancy Shaver told me Saturday night was a win for democracy, and the event couldn't have gone over better. She also said she knew of no arrests related to the protest.
At that hearing with Attorney General Jeff Sessions. But Democrats also questioned Sessions about an FBI report. That report claiming a new movement of black identity extremists are targeting law enforcement. Take a listen.
Black identity extremists likely motivated to target law enforcement officers. I believe earlier you said you were not familiar with the report. Is that correct?
Well, I haven't read it.
Is there a term or a report on white identity extremists? You mentioned you were familiar with black people who identify with their racial identity.
Yes. But it's not coming to me at this moment.
Would you consider Black Lives Matter a black identity extremist group?
I'm not able to comment on that. I have not so declared it.
I would like to know, what will you do to essentially roll back what is listed in this report? Because it's not accurate. Sir?
We will look at the report. I actually would be interested in reading it.
Joining me now is the executive editor for news at Foreign Policy, who helped break this story in October, Sharon Weinberger. Also founder of Gen Why Not, Jamera Burley. Thank you both for being here. As you listen to some of the excerpts here, Sharon, of the way the Attorney General was associating, relating, answering the questions here, again, when we're looking at black identity extremists, what did you take away? He even appeared to smile or smirk at one point.
Well, it's just shocking. I mean, this is a report that was issued in August by the FBI's counterterrorism domestic unit. And it was identifying what they said was an entirely new domestic terrorist threat. So to hear Sessions say that he has not heard of it or has not looked at the report just is very disingenuous at best. I mean, when we first saw this report, we were shocked.
Jamera, your reaction?
I mean, what is extremely disturbing about Jeff Sessions and the FBI rhetoric around this idea of black identity extremists is that it continues to highlight, I think, white Americans' disdain with black people demanding their equal due, which is protection under the law, access to resources, and the ability to freely move throughout society without being both victimized and criminalized. Instead, it does what it always does, which is to try to demean our movements and to villainize our leaders in a way that I think is actually counterproductive to moving our society in the right direction.
Your perception, Sharon, of when the Attorney General was asked by Congresswoman Bass there, what about the KKK? What about skinheads? What about neo-Nazis? Well, do you have, and of course I'm paraphrasing, a white identity extremist list or report also in process, or the idea thereof?
Well, that's precisely the problem, and that's precisely what is so disturbing about Sessions' remarks. So, you know, of course, there have been FBI reports previously on the threat of white supremacists, but we know that the KKK exists. We know that white supremacy exists. The very term black identity extremist is made up. There is no such group in the United States. It didn't exist before this FBI report. It came out of thin air. I think a former FBI agent that we interviewed said it best. It's basically a categorization for black people who scare them. It is lumping together a lot of different groups that have no other connection other than the fact that they're black. That just makes no sense whatsoever.
You know, Jamira, and you're a student of history here too, does this remind you of J. Edgar Hoover and in his efforts, again, to target specific civil rights groups?
No, exactly. It continues to try to undermine and I think criminalize our leaders in a way that undermines the movement. We saw that with MLK when J. Edgar Hoover wrote letters telling him to commit murder. We saw that when Fred Hampton was actually assassinated by police. And so I think this is nothing new. What is interesting, though, is that white men continue to pose the biggest threat to Americans every single day. It's been documented and verified that they are more likely to burn down churches, more likely to commit mass murders and mass shootings. And so Jeff Sessions' reality and his assessment on these people, I think, is both lacking in facts and both reality.
30 seconds to you here, Sharon. When asked again during this testimony, the Attorney General said, I have no senior member of my staff that is African American. What do you make of that?
Well, that is precisely the problem. You know, whatever boardroom these FBI employees were sitting in where they came up with the idea that black identity extremist was an appropriate term, you know, had there been one African-American person in that room, I don't think that would have happened.
Jamira, 15 seconds.
No, I agree. We need to make sure that young people and people of diverse backgrounds are in all places and spaces where they're being discussed if we're going to continue to have honest conversations around making our community safer.
WRAL, a fight inside a restaurant ends with 3 people injured after a shooting in a parking lot. Glad you're with us. I'm Ken Smith.
And I'm Catherine Brown. The new information and update of breaking news we brought you. Raleigh police have charged at least one person involved in the shooting and say more charges are possible. WRAL's Candace Sweat spoke with the manager of the restaurant and has his reaction to a violent night.
The restaurant was open today, but this is the kind of incident that has the manager here reevaluating his policies. He knows this could have been much worse, which is why he says hosting parties here may no longer be an option. Manager Tim Zhang of the Red Bull Asian Bistro says they'd closed down the restaurant early to accommodate a private party, a policy he's now rethinking. Around 1:45 Sunday morning, Zhang says an argument started inside the restaurant, then moved outside into the parking lot, where shots were fired. 3 men ended up at 3 separate area hospitals with non-life-threatening wounds. Meanwhile, following a heavy police response, 24-year-old Corey Hunter was charged with discharging a firearm. Zhang says there was no damage to the restaurant and his employees are unharmed. Still, he says the shooting is disturbing and uncharacteristic of a typical Saturday night here. He released a statement that reads in part, "We are very sad about the incident that occurred outside of our business last night. We just wanted to let our patrons know that we are a very safe restaurant, and occurrences like these are practically non-existent." Zhang says from now on he'll only consider small business gatherings. I did reach out to Raleigh police about any updates. They say at this point Hunter is the only one charged in the shooting. Of course, the investigation is still ongoing. In Raleigh, Candace Sweat, WRAL News.
And as always, thank you for watching. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. Also follow us on the usual media for more and interesting information like this.
Fight their asses.